And he felt an obligation to do that. So he did that. And he wrote a book called Tuhafat al-Falasifa. And he also did a great favor because he went through philosophy. He defined 6 branches of philosophy. And he said out of the 6 branches, 5 branches are actually fine. They're not really a problem. Politics isn't a problem. That's an Islamic science. Ethics isn't a problem. That's an Islamic science. Mathematics is not a problem. That's an Islamic science. He said these are all fine. But when we get into what's called metaphysics, we have a problem. And then he identified 20 problems within metaphysics in philosophy. And from those 20 problems, he identified 3 problems in particular. And he wrote that in his Tuhafat al-Falasifa, that the philosophers are a problem because they believe in the eternity of the world. They don't believe that the bodies are resurrected. And they don't believe that Allah knows particulars. They believe He knows universals. So he refuted and he did it using logic, because that's also one of the branches of philosophy. He said not only was logic not a problem, he said it was actually a fard kifaya, which was quite radical at the time as well. And that Ibn Taymiyyah took case with Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, because Ibn Taymiyyah said that mantiq, logic, should not be used in kalam, in theology. And he actually makes a brilliant case for it. And he probably preceded a modern understanding of one of the problems with logic that nobody had identified earlier, Ibn Taymiyyah. So actually Ibn Taymiyyah's contribution to the attack of logic is really important too, because Ibn Taymiyyah noted that one of the problems with logic is there's presuppositions in logic that are never challenged. Nobody really noticed that you have to believe certain things within the framework of logic before logic becomes useful. So what he was saying is the first principles of logic are not really being questioned, and that's a problem because they can be questioned. And that's a very modern idea. Imam al-Ghazali said logic was fine. It was basically just a method for reasoning. It was a heuristic tool that somebody could learn and then use in their reasoning. And he said he felt it should be fard kifaya, because if people don't know how to reason, they're susceptible to flaws in their reasoning. And also, the sophistical reasoning, which is logically flawed reasoning, is very common. And if you don't learn the problems that go with reasoning, you can fall into them very easily, like a common flaw that's used in people's arguments is what they call an ad hominem attack, for instance, where you're not really attacking the argument, you're attacking the arguer. So people will reject what somebody says because of who it is. And there are many others that he felt people should learn. And then he wrote a book on logic, which became a very popular book also. So he wrote this Tuhafat al-Falasifa, and some people say that he struck philosophy a blow in the Muslim world that it never recovered from. That's been an argument. And some people say that Imam al-Ghazali, it's actually problematic what he did, because philosophy was something that was beneficial. And about 100 years later, one of the great Andalusian scholars, Ibn Rushd, the grandson, not the grandfather, Ibn Rushd of Qurtuba, wrote a book, Tuhafat al-Tahafut, The Incoherence of the Incoherence, which was a refutation of Imam al-Ghazali's book. And that book was taken up, oddly enough, in the West. So that became a major, major intellectual landmark in the West. The West did not take Tuhafat al-Falasifa, they took Tuhafat al-Tahafut. So the West actually chose to go the way of Ibn Rushd and not the way of Imam al-Ghazali. The Muslim world chose to go the way of Imam al-Ghazali and not the way of Ibn Rushd. Now, one could argue, and many modern Muslims have argued, is that Imam al-Ghazali is actually at the root of the backwardness and the problems that are wrong with the Muslim world. I mean, this is a modern argument that you'll actually find in books and amongst certain groups of thinkers in the Muslim world, particularly in the late 19th, early 20th century. There was a real attack on Imam al-Ghazali. Now you have to understand the importance of that attack, because Imam al-Ghazali was called Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam. Imam al-Ghazali is to Islam what St. Thomas Aquinas was to Catholicism. He really laid the foundations for the Islamic religion during his time, and those foundations carried the religion for the next several centuries, really almost 1,000 years. So there are Muslims that argued that. Now, if you look at it at a deeper level, you have to become aware of the fact that the West has lost their religion. The path, the course that they chose to take destroyed their faith. Europe is a faithless civilization now. Really. Now, America is not a philosophical country. America has never engaged in serious philosophy. The only philosophical tradition in America is pragmatism. Europe was engaged in philosophy at a very deep level. It's a pragmatic country, and it's had a very interesting relationship with faith. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, but it's had an interesting relationship with faith. But Europe's faith, the underpinnings of it were beginning to erode in the 17th and 18th century. By the 19th century, at the intellectual level, there was serious erosion. The 20th century, with 2 world wars, pretty much wipes out the faith of Europe. That's what happens. Now, one of the real interesting aspects of the modern world is the faith of the Muslims.